Hi, and welcome to the first video in our module on projects, tibbles, and importing data. Today we're going to talk about what projects are and what a tibble is. Now you may have noticed, I want to talk for you a minute about a thing called scope. So R doesn't see what was in your directory the last time unless you saved it. And we've asked you to set your global options so that you don't save things automatically. The reason for that is sometimes you run into errors, and if you save things automatically, then when you reload it, you've reloaded those same errors. So one of the reasons we use our markdown for everything and is to save everything so that when we come back to it, it's all there in one place. But our markdown is like its own environment. It's like it lives in this bubble. So if you don't tell it, like to library something in our markdown, it won't find the function. If you don't define the variable or read it in, it won't know what it is and will give you errors. Now, some of the things you can do in your R markdown is you can do a thing like get working directory to find out what the working directory is. So you can do a get WD, and this tells me where I am on my machine. You can do a set working directory, but that is not something, you can do that from the console, but that's not something you ever want to do from your R markdown because that makes it not reproducible. If you do that, then other people, it goes and sets their working directory to maybe a place they don't want to be or to a path they don't have on their computer. Now, sometimes you want to keep your data that is input and your output files where you can find them easily. Okay, so one thing we like to do is have a directory or a folder called data in our working directories. This is going to be either where your R markdown document lives, and you can keep all your input and output files there. That way, when you're backing stuff up, you don't have to back up that particular folder. But everything that you do should get backed up somewhere, either to a thumb drive or to the cloud somewhere, so that you don't lose all your work if you were to have a problem with your computer. Another way to accomplish this is to use something called projects. So projects allow me to keep, that will start a new directory, and it will put me in the working directory where that file lives. And I can keep all my files for that project together. And you can also, when you get to next semester and you learn how to use GitHub, then you can have it to where you can actually update GitHub with those files as you do them. So projects, you will see you can do, when you go to the top menu, you do File, New Project, and you can start a project. So I'm going to pause this and make the screen bigger so that I can show you how to do it. I couldn't figure out how to make the screen bigger in the middle of a video, so we will work around that. And just say you can do new project when you're starting a project, and like each module, I would have in its own project. In this case, I have all of our markdowns that I use to generate our online resources in a project. So you can also, if you already have a folder, you can use that as your project and set that up to be a project. Okay, so now I want to talk to you for just a minute about tibbles. So when you do a read_CSV, it brings everything in as a tibble. So it's automatically a tibble. You can also set up a tibble in some way like this, where you're setting the X, the Y, the Z, so you set the variable names and the values. You'll notice this one automatically replicates the 3 to be the correct length, and then Z can actually be computed from X and Y. Okay, so you can also use, for instance, you can do as_tibble of, let's say, Aris, which is a built-in data set that is not a tibble. And then it makes it a tibble. So some of the things that tibbles do that are wonderful is it tells me all the variable names, and if there's not room over there, it'll put the rest of them here. It only prints the first 10 rows or so to the screen unless I overwrite that with a different value. and it tells me what type each of the variables is. So I can see these are doubles, which would be a numeric with the decimal points. And this is a factor. So I can see that easily with tibbles, which I can't do with just a data frame. So if I compare that, for instance, to Iris without making it a tibble, look what it did. It scrolled the whole data set. I've got to scroll way back up to the top to try to find what the variable names were. And it doesn't tell me how the system is representing that. I don't know if those are character 5.1 or if it's a numeric 5.1, for instance. I don't know if this is characters or factors. So it also automatically gives me the row numbers, which I may or may not want. So tibbles have some things that you can do that you can't do with regular data frames. Now, one of the things you can do is, with a tibble, is you can have different variable names that don't necessarily conform to base R standards. So for instance, now I have made a variable name that is a frowny face and a 50 ways that starts with a number. Neither of those are allowed in base R, but in a tibble, I can do that, and I can see here's the first variable, and frowny face was replicated, and 50 ways has the different entries there for that one. So another thing I can do in setting up a tibble is I can do what's called a tribble, which is a transposed tibble. So rather than setting name equals in a vector and then average equals in a vector, I can put them in column form, which putting the tilde in front of them. And that way I can see that things are lining up the way they're supposed to and that values are going to go with what they need to. So this is the tibble that's resulting from that. So I have the name, average, and grade are my variables, and it has the correct entries. Now, one of the things you may need to do with a tibble is you may want to see more of it than what it prints to the screen, because it's going to default and only print a certain amount to the screen. So the way I can do that, if I want more rows, I can set in, and I can set it to any number, including infinity, and I can set the width. In this case, I'm going to set the width equals to infinity, and I will find, okay, so now it showed me all of the columns, and it only showed me the first 12 rows. Okay, so that's the ways you can modify how the tibble deals with printing to the screen. But the default, of course, is if I just did NYC flights 13, let's look at flights. And I don't know if I've showed you this before, but the double colon says look in this package for this variable. Okay, so if I just did that, because it's a tibble, it'll only do the first 10 rows, and it'll only show me what fits to my screen. And depending on the size of your screen, it may show you more or less, and how you have the windows sized. Okay, but then it tells me what all the other variables are and what type they are. Okay, so I don't see all of them, but I can look at them. There's also, let's see if this is in this, I can do a glimpse. And the glimpse function will actually let me see the first few entries of every variable and tell me the type. Okay, so we'll come back next time and we'll talk about indexing into a tibble.